Let's get going. We met on Substack because I make comics, you make comics. So thanks for being on the Comics Odyssey show, Hannah. And you're here to talk about comics and Substack.
Yeah, it's exciting to meet so many people who both like making and reading comics. I feel like Substack is way different from any other platform I've been on in that people are actually interested in building a community and supporting each other and sharing each other's work. It's really cool.
Yeah, so here we are doing that. So tell us about your comic that you're publishing on Substack and so that we know, could tell us about the story, the characters, and all that stuff.
Okay. This story came to me in sort of an autistic fugue. um for years I had noticed, I think actually Joan of Arc got popular with feminists before she was even officially sainted by the Roman Catholic Church. But for years I had noticed a lot of people who don't really like Christianity sort of claiming that Joan of Arc was one of them. And then a friend of mine bought me a book by Rachel Wilson called Occult Feminism. It's just sort of about the history of feminism and its association with theosophy. And that filled me with white hot rage. So then I decided to come up with an idea that would sort of take Joan of Arc back from um, the people who hate the religion that she loved so much, and instead put her in a future where her ideas would come up against feminist ideas that were claiming her. So sorry if that's way too much preamble, but the story is about diesel punk future where most human beings have died out and nature's kind of taking all of the cities back. And the few people who survive are fairly ignorant, kind of living hand to mouth, and they're battling against sort of the anti-humanist movement that you would see around social media now. Um, the mutants, who are really just different kinds of human beings, but don't identify as human beings. Um, they hate marriage, they hate childbirth. Uh, they only really reproduce by stealing other people's children. And following the main historical plot points of Joan of Arc, we just go through this character's life as she battles zombies and mutants and feminism, and hopefully with enough interesting twists that you won't be quite sure how it ends, and you'll be excited, be surprised by how it ends. Yeah.
So Joan of Arc, uh, so it's like a future historical Joan of Arc fiction.
Yeah. I've been calling it Joan of Arc meets Mad Max. I should have just said that.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one,
It
yeah.
saved both of us a lot of time if I had just said that.
We have a half hour, so we're good. Maybe use that one like at cons when people are
Sure.
flying by and you're
Yeah.
trying to get their attention.
It
Yeah.
definitely won't piss you off. It's just two things that you love mashed together.
Yeah. It's interesting you point out Joan of Arc. I've found that the stories of saints are quite appropriate for comic book uh, adaptation. I was reading a biography of Saint Vincent de Paul, and then all of a sudden there was a pirate attack,
Oh,
you know.
nice.
So, it's they have lives that are quite fascinating
Mhm.
and intense. So I think
Yeah.
it's a good medium, comics medium to
Mhm.
because we don't know necessarily a lot of these saints, the old ones, we don't
Yeah.
necessarily know what they look like, and we don't have all the details of their lives. So kind of the comics medium kind of lets you fill it in with the imagination. So yeah, that's cool. Um,
Even
how
the
did
saints
when
who are very historical, that don't have a whole lot of legends attached to their official stories, still had just wild biographies. I've read
Yeah.
St. Patrick's a couple times. I started reading that as a teenager, and I go back to it a lot because how many people escape slavery twice? You
Hmm.
know, he was such a cool guy, and he was a really humble guy. And there's wild stories about him, but not in his biography.
Hmm.
So I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, no, uh that's a great direction. I did read Grant Morrison's Super Gods, and
Oh,
right now I'm clicking in how he kind of draws these parallels between uh various gods, pantheons, and these superheroes. But you know, probably it kind of glosses over the fact that the Western canon of Western religious canon of lore, if you want to call it that,
mhm.
has all the archetypes as well. Like
I hadn't thought about that.
martyrdom. Yeah, martyrdom is a heroic act, right? Of self-sacrifice. So yeah, our heroes who are self-sacrificing, like in the superhero genre of comics,
Yeah,
I think
Christianity
it's
has so
very,
permeated lots of cultures,
yeah.
even ones that aren't predominantly made up of Christians. It's kind of hard to get away from it, even though I
Hmm.
don't think any superhero was really meant to be Jesus. I mean, Jesus is just such an amazing figure.
Hmm.
If you're writing about an amazing person, there's going to be some Jesus in there, you know?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that Superman was probably a Moses analog, given that his creators were Jewish.
Mm-hmm. I
Kind of
wrote a whole article about that back on Easter.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of Jewish writers have written on that.
Oh yeah. Interesting.
The
Yeah, it's a
Talmud
cool,
has illustrations in it that it's been suggested they sort of were like proto comic books, or they might
huh,
have helped inspire comic books.
cool.
A lot of Jews who went into hiding when they were forced to convert were called crypto Jews. And people were saying, is it really a coincidence that these boys who grew up reading the Talmud every Passover created a hero from a planet called Krypton? You know,
Oh,
and I was like, I've always thought that. Somebody else thought that too. I thought that was so cool.
wow.
Yeah,
That is a great tidbit. Yeah,
yeah.
that's wonderful. Yeah. Wow, that kind of blows my mind. That's cool.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you wind up going back to Jesus again just because Moses typifies Jesus so much.
Yeah.
So these guys who did not intend to write about Jesus wind up with a character who gets compared to him all the time.
Yeah,
Superman.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that counter argument that Superman is not a Christ archetype. He was based
Mm-hmm.
on Moses, but
Mm-hmm. But Moses is a Christ
Moses,
archetype. So
exactly. Yeah. Just the other way in the going backwards in the timeline.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can have really this sort of conversation in other comics circles, which was kind of my frustration.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about, I read a lot about shamanism and the the pattern of transformation
Mm-hmm.
in storytelling.
And that would probably be
And
something that would interest Grant Morrison.
yeah, yeah. But again, like these guys, they take it so far. But then if you go back to, the people who influence the people that influence them,
Mm.
there's more meat on the bone there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, you go to, I don't know, leagueofcomicgeeks.com and say something like that, and people are gonna think you have two heads, right? Like what? No, what? Iceman, whatever, right? Like,
Well, if you go to the
um,
Tolkien Society and try to talk about J.R.R. Tolkien's Catholic faith, people will look at you weird.
hmm, yeah,
And
it's
that's
pretty,
because that was founded by a neo-pagan who was good buddies, well, who was having sex with a guy who was good buddies with Joseph Gardner.
hmm, right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, these sorts of conversations are difficult to have in standard comics kind of circles on the internet, and a lot of it is like, what Tom King did what on the YouTube, and it's like it's getting a little old, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful that we're sort of building a new thing here on Substack, and I wanted to talk to you about that. So if you were to describe comics on Substack to people from the outside, how would you describe it?
Well, I would say it's a lot better than any of the other platforms I've been on that are specifically for comic books, like Tapas or Webtoon. I found it's you don't get as much engagement there. There are all these really anal requirements for resolution and size. So then if you made your comic here and you want to put it over there, you got to completely resize every page. I think Webtoon is the one that also won't get you any views unless you're uploading an entire chapter every week. And
Goodness.
like comics are 20 pages long, and a page takes, I would say, at least 8 hours, or average 8 hours to make. Depends on your art style, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just wild. But Substack will let you um, upload paid upload like any resolution, upload it in PDF form, um, make it as long or shorter you want, and people find you. People actually just discover what you posted and comment on it and interact with it. It's like, I didn't even ask you to do that. That's crazy.
Hmm.
You're doing this because you want to.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
what's been the reception to your stories as you publish them so far?
People have been really nice. I was really expecting a lot of grandstanding and offended women who probably just decided to ignore me instead of just get me more attention by being mad at me. But so far, even people who don't share my faith or agree with all of my political views have still been really supportive and actually engaged with the story and following the story. They're not just leaving vague comments like "good job," you know. um, yeah, that's been great. I'm bad at people, so to be doing this well is kind of strange for me.
You're bad at people, you mean like in social situations?
Yes, and I think it's a little easier for me online, but even then I tend to say the wrong thing or do something that everybody else kind of intuitively knew was a faux pas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so far so good. I mean,
Maybe I'm maturing. Maybe I'm getting better at it.
you learn tricks as you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know a whole
So,
lot about your journey on Substack. What were you on before then?
oh, what I deleted everything at one point.
Nice.
It was quite a long time ago that I got rid of Facebook. It must have been maybe 8 years ago.
Mm.
Just, yeah. And I found what was happening on Facebook is that my friends that I liked, when I started interacting with them on Facebook, I stopped liking them. And I was
Yeah,
like,
we all
this
show a
is,
bad side of ourselves there.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, why should I be subjecting myself to this sort of, whatever is happening here? So I got rid of that. And same with Twitter, same situation. Uh, Friends, and then you meet them on Twitter, and all of a sudden you dislike each other. It's just very bizarre. So no more of that.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole comics thing is fairly recent for me. So I was able to kind of start on a better foot than if it had been like 10 years ago.
Mm.
And I actively decided I'm just going to do YouTube because I can just draw and just show people um and well, I was happy to draw by myself with nobody watching because I got to draw anyway.
Yeah.
And then my brother found the streams. And then for a while, it was pretty much just me and my brother, which was kind of fun. And and then Substack, I did some research into, actually, it was Brian Polito. I listened to what he had to say about marketing your comic stories. Brian Polito is the creator of Lady Death.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he said number one's got to be email list. If you don't you they're not into your stuff until you have their email, more or less, he said. And then I knew that Substack was a newsletter thing, so I
Oh,
looked
yeah.
into it, and I liked Substack. I liked that they were kind of like their design was kind of bad and didn't really make sense.
Hmm.
Like if you go to your Substack homepage, all the articles you read are at the top, but nobody really navigates a website that way. Where you look at the
Yeah, I didn't
top
think
and
about
you,
that.
yeah, people scroll. That's what they do. So like
Well,
right off the
Instagram
bat,
is doing that now too, where they'll line something along the top and you'll see the
right,
face of
right.
somebody you like and you'll click on that.
That's the stories.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that story leads to the next story, leads to the next story. It's still a scrolly kind of a
Kind of, yeah.
mechanism. Yeah. Whereas like the Substack has all the newsletters, but at the end
Hmm.
of the next news of the newsletter, it doesn't say click here to read the next one, right? So it
Honestly, I haven't done any exploring on Substack at all.
yeah.
I'm just here
So
so
the
everybody
thing
can pay attention to me.
that's a refreshing honesty.
Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes you see things that are interesting that you like, but I have a lot going on in my day-to-day life. I
Sure,
really
sure.
can't sit around subscribing to a bunch of stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I started with that because I have friends that were interested in my comics, and I just started a newsletter that way, and bit by bit I kind of poked around, and yeah. But I'd like to know, I'm curious, why comics? Why did you start making comics at all?
That's a good question. You said something earlier, like you're gonna draw anyway because you have to, you know? And I thought of that verse. It's like a fire shut up in my bones, you know? I've been drawing comics since I was a kid. I think once I stumbled upon comics my mom had drawn when she was a kid, and she's not really a particularly artistic. I mean, she's not a bad artist, but it's just not an interest for her at all. But then I started sort of copying what she drew. There were Archie comics lying around my grandpa's house. I actually remember the first time I walked into a comic book store too. My dad was deep in debt trying to sell all his baseball cards, and he took me into a comic book store just as Death of Superman had happened. So everywhere I turned, there was somebody crying over Superman's dead body, you know. And he bought me a Little Mermaid comic book that I still remember pretty vividly. Um,
I see.
so I just drew comics a lot as a kid, and it's a lot easier than making movies.
Sure is.
But it can sort of give you that same feeling that a movie can give you.
Yeah.
So it's a
I
great medium as far as that goes.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely more accessible to the individual to make comics than movies. I'd say it gives you a better feeling than movies, personally. That's my
Hmm.
argument. Yeah.
And man, I can't hold a movie in my hand. That's for sure.
Hmm.
I love being able to hold a book.
Yeah.
And you can take as long as you want to really admire the art, which is
Yep.
cool. There's some
Yeah.
amazing art out there. I don't make it, but there's some amazing art out there. Um,
Well, you have more say as a reader when you read a comic. Because a movie, you
true.
sit there and the movie happens to you,
Yeah.
right?
You get to
But
decide the what how the actor delivered the line and
uh-huh.
all the
Yeah, the
interpretation.
voice in your head.
Yeah.
You when you have an action page, it shows you from action to action, but how it went from one like say from one standing pose to a kick that you fill that in, and
True.
then
Yeah. I didn't
the
think about that.
you can read the text first, or you look at the art first. You decide. When you look at a movie, the time goes linear, but when you look at a comic page, you can get a whole bunch of time at a glance,
I've heard
and
some
then it
people say that's why they can't read comics because they look at everything at once and it overwhelms them.
ah
But that's a
well,
good point. I
they're weak.
yes. I, probably, yeah.
No, they're not. They just
Um
need to get acclimated. Yeah, but it also gives the creator more say as well, because you get to direct the eye in a certain way. So it's in a way it's more collaborative with the the creator, and between the creator and the reader, right?
hmm,
Whereas a movie is a little
yeah.
bit more one way. Yeah.
You're really making a lot of good points about how um ima- the imagination of the reader is more engaged with a comic book
Yes.
than with a lot of other mediums.
Yeah, for sure, for
Maybe
sure.
not novels, but
Yeah, well, the novels in a way require you to do all of the visual.
yeah.
So
If you're even a visual thinker.
yeah, so in a way it's less collaborative, right?
Hmm.
Because it gives you no indication to the visuals really, right?
Yeah.
Because a shade of blue is gonna look a certain way in your head, but
Mm.
you can really, I don't know. I might be stretching it because I am biased towards comic. I'm totally on team comics there, but
Yeah.
yeah, novels are probably, a more refined art form.
Well, that's a good question. What would make an art form more refined too?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, you debate that for a while.
yeah, that's above my pay grade.
I would say the big flaw with comic books is it takes so much time to produce and
Yes,
it
it is
costs
time
like
consuming.
$6 to buy, and then you flip through it and it's over in 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's rough. That I think
yeah,
that's the main reason why it's really struggled to be lucrative for a really long time. It's like
right.
who wants to spend that much money for that little tiny bit of fun?
Yeah, yeah, there's got to be. Yeah, it's tough. It's just the amount of time it takes to make versus the amount of time it takes to read. There are tricks you can use to slow readers down.
Oh,
Um,
like
yeah.
what? Make us smarter.
Um, well, I definitely read like a Tintin book a lot more slowly
Mm,
than modern American comics. Uh, Older comics, American comics, take longer to read. There's more text.
yeah.
Yeah. A Tintin book just has uh like a fair amount of text, but also the detail in the background tends to really draw you in. It becomes
I was
more
going to ask if that
immersive.
was why. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely that has something to do with it.
But then that slows
Um,
the artist down too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You draw like
There's
all those teeny tiny little lines everywhere, which I really admire because I mean, I see it in my head, but when it comes time to do it, I'm like,
right.
there's a
I mean
building.
the
Yeah.
backgrounds there.
Yeah.
So I'm
Lots of
doing
textures and stuff.
those to practice.
Okay.
I took those from Albrecht Dürer. I thought that
Nice.
was a really good effect to express dark, like the dark of night, to just put a bunch of close lines. Also, John Romita Jr. did that in some Daredevil comics. I thought it was cool. It's a thing. So I do them by hand because on the live streams it gives me something to do. But definitely, if this became more like a commercial enterprise, in order to speed up production, I do like 3 pages of them, and in Photoshop, I'd just pick and choose pieces and put them in the backgrounds, and cut them out as appropriate. But in a way, it's kind of relaxing for me to be
Sure.
listening to relaxing music and doing lines like that. Yeah.
And
calm me down.
you're doing traditional art, totally traditional?
Yes, and I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about your art process there.
It's not the
Do
one I'd
you
like to have.
Oh, okay, tell me about that. So you're encountering some challenges and limitations. So tell me what's
Sure, yeah. I mean, the main limitation would be money, and the second one would probably be time. Um, I just quit foster care. Foster care will take up your time like you wouldn't believe. And that's not why I quit, but I had to quit. Um, I'm homeschooling two kids. I'm sort of trying to urban homestead. Uh, I just have a lot of interest, so I gotta do everything, and I gotta start projects when I haven't finished my other ones. So I would love to have that. I mean, I have a drafting table. I would love to just sit out and draw it with a pencil because, gosh, drawing with a pencil is so much nicer than drawing with a little stylus. But I don't have the big giant scanner, or I don't. I want to spend a bunch of money on this hobby when it's not paying me anything, you know. So right now I'm just using a tablet that was $20. It doesn't have a screen on it, and I'm blindly drawing on the tablet while staring at my laptop and trying to make trying to make the lines go in the right direction and trying to finish the page before uh I run out of time in the day. The nice thing about getting interrupted by my kids all the time is I stand up and stretch every 20 minutes. So
that's important to you.
yeah, there's definitely an upside to that. But I try to get all my chores done by noon, which is when my kids' screen time starts, and then I draw as much as I possibly can. Uh, and lately, I've been finishing before supper, which is amazing. Um, so I'm trying to crank out one page a day, which is
Wow.
more prolific than I've ever been in my entire life. But I feel like the quality could be a little better. I could do better. Um, so if I manage to turn this project into money somehow, I'd like to get a nicer tablet and jazz up the art I've already done a bit before I print it.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Um, the Yeah, there's a couple things. That's a really good output, and it's in keeping with the spirit of American comic art, which was I was talking to James. Um, I was talking to James from Alpha Red. He was talking about how comics started as a vehicle for advertising, and there had to be X amount of Spider-Man comics in order to put advertising in front of kids' faces, right?
Mm.
So it was just crank it out, and there was no, well, I'm an artiste, it's just it's on the page, go, right? Like there's
Yep.
deadlines. So,
Mm.
and it's also it's very punk. It reminds me how like this is comics are still punk because it's accessible, right? Like for 20 bucks and a laptop, which most people have, you can you just go. You can just kind of get your stories out there,
Oh, I
which
thought you
is
meant punk in that sometimes the quality is trash, but it's trash on purpose, so that makes it okay.
well, that's true also in some cases,
Yeah.
but it's the reason that punk was quote unquote trash is because regular people were making it. They just
Yeah.
it's three-chord rock, right? So
Yeah.
it's more about the energy, which is, kind of
And
like Kirby.
authenticity.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. All right, we are almost through with our time here. So thank you for coming on the show. Tell people what your Substack is. It'll be linked and everything.
You can find my
And
Substack by searching my name, Hannah Rose Williams, and my comic is called 1000 Years of War.
yeah, sure. Recommended. Uh, Very fun stuff. I like your swagger on Substack on notes and stuff. I think it's refreshing and invigorating. I'm
Unfortunately,
glad
I
to.
can't be any other way, so I'm glad it works for you.
Yeah, it's I'm really glad to count you among my internet friends. Thanks for
Yay.
taking the time to have a conversation with me. Hopefully we'll get a lot more of these different people coming and kind of discussing comics in a casual way like this. Thank you so much, and
Thanks for
have
having
a
me.
good evening. Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening to you.